April 1, 2024. This is the fall preview, and this show is all about the Detroit Lions. That's right, the Detroit Lions, and in the NFC North, I'm your host, the Beetle. Yes, that's right, the Beetle, former defensive back in the MAC, Miami University of Ohio, way back in the day. Let me just give a little shout out today. What I mean by back in the day, 79 and 80. So, back in the day. So, I'm giving you a player's point of view, a breakdown of the Detroit Lions. And let me just say, there's a little bias here, even though I'm right now Miami Dolphins fan, always been a Miami Dolphins fan, way back in the day during the 72, 73 year, all perfect year, but way back in a little preference, a little bias for the Detroit Lions, because yes, the Beetle lived in Detroit for 5 years. Yes, downtown Detroit. Yes, I'm a graduate of Wayne State University. Yeah, gotta give a shout out to Wayne State University and Detroit. And so I'm gonna show my bias in this. I gotta bring that right up front. I gotta be real. These productions are real. So I'm gonna give you my my insight as a football player, but a little preference, a little bias to the Detroit Lions, because hey, I saw them at games in the Pontiac Silverdome back in the day when I used to go to the games at Pontiac Silverdome and used to travel out there during Thanksgiving Day game, drive out there in my Tercel. The Beatles giving up a little bit too much, but used to go to the Detroit Lions games. Really loved the Lions back then. There was Billy Sims. I think there was Billy Sims, and as well as there was scratch. Also, some no-name players back then. But I just love going to Detroit Lions game. Matter of fact, one of my former teammates played for the Detroit Lions during that the year in which they brought in all different types of players. So yes, I'm very familiar with the Detroit Lions, at least preference history of Detroit Lions. But now I'm going to give you my insight on today's Detroit Lions. I'm going to give you a little shout out to Lindy Sports as well. And let me just say, I'm so pleased of how this organization has completely changed the culture of the Detroit Lions with the hiring of Dan Campbell just a few years ago by manager Brad Holmes. Dan Campbell is the man, still the man. I know many of the Detroit fans were a little skeptical the first year because he's so emotional. He's one of those throwback players, former player and coaches, but it has resulted in a complete change of the culture of the Lions. And let me just say, I saw one of his early press conference just a few days ago, and I'm going to give a shout out to Lions Talk by Chat Sports. That's right, Lions Talk by Chat Sports. One of the local, they follow the Detroit Lions, as well as shout out to Detroit Lions Syndicate. Detroit Lions Syndicate. 2 YouTube shows that I checked out, and then saw the practices after each day. But the one press conference I saw Dan Campbell gave after practice, man, I will run through a wall for Dan Campbell, because he just brings it. He got all emotional too, because they were doing a practice session with the New York Giants, and this past week they paired up against the New York Giants, and they actually played a game with the New York Giants. But before the game, they practiced. Dan Campbell just says he has so much respect for the Giants organization, class organization. Why? Because the New York Giants drafted Dan Campbell when he was coming out of college. He truly appreciates the administration, the management giving himself a chance in the NFL. And he said that's the reason why the joint practice, he said, this is very special. It was he was about ready to break down in this, just talking about his relationship with the management of the Giants, and that was just so genuine. And he gave much props to the coaching staff there, but he said you just got to put back in the work. And the Giants organization really gave him a chance and put the work in. And so he says he transferred that time when he was a player with the Giants into his team now with the Detroit Lions. You gotta put in the work, even though they're getting a lot of love from the national media and how the Detroit Lions have elevated. He said this is time to put in the work. So I like his attitude right during training camp, right before the first preseason game. But Dan Campbell, he's the real deal. He don't hold back any punches. So again, a great hire with Dan Campbell. Here's the issue. Oh, I gave him praise. But here's the issue. Dan Campbell needs better. Okay, not better, but he needs to constantly bring in, let me just say, coaches around on his staff. He had to clean house on the offense a bit with the offense. He brought in Ben Johnson, but on the hot seat, defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn. That's their weak part. I'm getting right to it right now. Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator, is just not bringing it. The Lions defense suffered last year, and even Lindy Sports says this about Aaron Glenn. Coming off the winningest season in franchise history, there aren't a lot of hot sheets these days, but after years of being lauded for trying to make lemonade out of a bad roster, excuses have now run out of defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn. He's hugely popular with the players and around the league, but his units have never performed that well. Now that the Lions have finally invested heavily on that side of the ball, including spending their top 2 draft picks on quarterbacks after signing another in free agency and trading yet for another, the time is to produce. And if they continue to hold back their defense, the fingers will start to point at Glenn awfully quick. So the pressure is on defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn. Now, I remember Aaron Glenn as a defensive back with the New York Jets. He always brought his A game as a cover corner with the New York Jets. Now, as defensive coordinator, and I've seen him last year when they did the HBO Hard Knocks, and or last year or the year before. I think it was the year before. And he's a player's coach. However, he plays too many favorites. And when you're a head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, you can't play favorites all the time. When a player's not performing, when you're not putting pressure on, and you're not scheming well, you're not slowing down the opponent, when you know your offense, particularly past couple of years, was trying to get their groove on, trying to get in the flow. So Aaron Glenn, with the extra defensive players, he has to step up his coaching ability. On offensive coordinator is Ben Johnson. They have a former quarterback, Mark Brunell, as quarterback coach. You remember Mark Brunell, lefty, played for the Jacksonville Jaguars throughout his almost entire career. Great quarterback coach, which helps Jared Goff to acclimate, to further improve his elevation after coming from the LA Rams a few years ago. Now give Goff credit for adjusting to the new offense, believing that he can perform, and they're giving him the tools to perform. Jared Goff is a former number 1 overall pick who took the Rams to the Super Bowl and then was benched before they're unceremoniously traded to the Lions. And the Matthew Stafford big deal. And I'll get to Matthew Stafford when I get to LA Rams. I'm not gonna say nothing about Matt Stafford, but yes, it's taking the Detroit Lions to get acclimated to Jared Goff, rightly so, because Stafford did a lot for the community. But Jared Goff, he's not the most personable person, but his performance has elevated, has been, let me just say, consistent, and so now he's getting more acclimated to his offense. Now they have running backs, signing Bears running back David Montgomery and taking Jahmyr Gibbs with the 12th overall pick. And Jahmyr Gibbs is the real deal. Let me just say, Jahmyr Gibbs is the real deal. Okay? Comes from Alabama. So, again, he's the real deal. So, I really like that. The offense is has that. Oh, let me give a shout out to the wide receivers. They are who stepped up the most? Ahmad St. Brown. Let me just say oh my gosh. And on the Lions Talk, they raved about Amon St. Brown. He's referred to as the Sun God. Yeah, I didn't know that. He's referred to as the Sun God. And I think his dad was a weightlifter, was a bodybuilder. And so he's come in and he stepped up his prowess, but he's got his body primed. He's been working overtime, elevate how he can handle being as a wide receiver, not being the biggest wide receiver, but being able to take a hit and then deliver a hit once he gets the ball. But he's referred to as the Sun God. Then there's also a breakout wide receiver, Jameson Williams. They were raving about Jameson Williams. Again, another Alabama wide receiver. He's been doing outstanding in camp. Let me get to the secondary in camp. Let me just say, I'd have to say this. When I checked out one of the days, their secondary was getting burned. Getting burned by the Giants. Yeah, and when they were practicing with the Giants, their secondary was getting burned by the Giants. Oh my gosh. Okay, time for my water break. Excuse me, but when during that practice, and they did have. Oh, by the way, that was the day after that. That was a big skirmish in practice when the players, the Giants and the Lions got in a big skirmish. There was fights after fights, and that's what happens in training camp. You know, after you get a little pads on, and after you get tired of going against your own teammate, when you're going against a competitor like the Lions were going against the Giants, the gloves come off, and then you start to see some fight. That's what, by the side, coaches love that because it just shows the players you're fighting for a livelihood. Okay, the players are fighting for livelihood, so they're edgy. So you don't want to see the fights, but you want your players to be prepared for a battle. And I'm sure Dan Campbell was ready for a battle, to see that battle out there. Let me just say also, backup quarterback Hendon Hooker, he looked pretty good. Yeah, he's not going to see much, but he looked impressive. Let me just say, coming from Tennessee, they traded for him. He looked really good in practice during the training camp, so I was very impressed. Let me just say a shout out to, of course, on their defense. I'm not gonna miss your boy, Aiden Hutchinson. I'll get his name now. Aiden Hutchinson, University of Michigan graduate, All-Pro, edge rusher. He's still looking good. Gotta give a shout out to Aiden Hutchinson. He just brought it. He just loved Detroit. He loved being drafted by Detroit Lions. I remember when he was drafted a couple of years ago, and he just celebrated being drafted by his hometown place, state of Detroit. And so Aiden Hutchinson will bring it with class. And let me just say, he made a name for himself a couple of years ago in training camp when he was a rookie, when he actually sang, sang a Michael Jackson song. I saw it on let me say on HBO Hard Knocks. Now that's a classic. So just a little sidebar there. But Aiden Hutchinson, he brings an attitude. Really like their defensive line with Aiden Hutchinson, Marcus Davenport. There's Mitchell and McNeil. I'm sorry, and then Reeder. The linebackers, Jack Campbell from Iowa. Man, I was impressed by Jack Campbell last year. He's a complete stud. He brings the hits and he flies around so fast. So the linebacking core is very solid. I also like Rodriguez. He's his third year. He's on second team, but he does see action on the first team. But he's primarily he was just outcompeted last year. But I do still like Rodriguez as linebackers. Their secondary, they brought in Carlton Davis III from Tampa Bay, a big DB in the offseason, 6'1", 206. Now, there's a lot of hype about Carlton Davis. I remember him with the championship team of the Tampa Bay Bucks. He brings a good, solid coverage, but over the past year, he's not as great of a shutdown. He brings his physicality, but he's not a shutdown corner. He's got his physical, and he makes a lot of experienced plays. But I've seen him kind of lose his A game a little bit last year, a bit more last year. And of course, the Lions drafted corners, Terran Arnold from Alabama. And so they're trying to help out their secondary as much as possible. Let me make sure I hit all this. Yes, after finishing in the bottom 2 yards of the per pass, they were forced to cut Sam Sutton last year, and then now they could allow Branch to move around the defense and play more safety. Again, they're mixing up the secondary. That's one of their weakest parts, and that's the reason why they traded for brought in Carlton Davis. And so again, their secondary, and they also lost, I mentioned him. They also lost wide receiver Josh Reynolds. They brought in who else? Another quarterback, Amik Robertson. That's what I want to say, Amik Robertson. So their secondary is their weak part. Moving on to the special teams, while some teams were wary of kick change, the Lions were among the big supporters of it. Absolutely in favor. Campbell said, because it gives us a chance to play more special teams. Give the way Detroit has played teams under, it's easy to see why. Campbell is highly aggressive and creative, like rolling with the former high school quarterback at punter. Jack Fox has been pretty good as a punter. The intangibles with the Detroit Lions. The Lions have always been well supported despite these struggles. Now they're winning. They're waking a sleeping giant. They did a great job against Kansas City Chiefs. Yet at back home, Ford Field sold out the season before, registering 133 decibels. So they have support of the home team, home crowd. The culture is different with the Lions. The Lions have become the favorite in the NC North. And looking at their schedule very quickly, their schedule starts off with the LA Rams, hosting the LA Rams. Ooh, good. Ooh, good. Let's take down those Rams right up front and send Matt Stafford back home to LA with the loss. Take that, Stafford. Don't come back to Detroit. That's where they go. Don't come back to Detroit, Matthew Stafford. We had enough of you. Sorry about that. I had to say that because I know Lions fans were just getting sick and tired of Matthew Stafford coming up with excuses. So I'm sure they're gonna be pleased about that game right up front. So hopefully they won't get too hyped up and just put a hurting on him. That's all. Send him back to LA. I'm sorry. I'm telling it like it is. Take that, Stafford. It's obvious that I have a dig against Matthew Stafford. Yes, it's obvious. I'm sorry about that. But that's the first game, LA Rams. Next game, they host Tampa Bay. Next game, they go to Arizona. Next game, they host Seattle. Then they have a bye. Then they go to Dallas. Then they go to Minnesota. Then they have host the Titans. Then they go to Green Bay. Then they go to Houston, Texas. Then they host Jacksonville. Then they go to Indy. Then they host Chicago for that Thursday Thanksgiving Day game. That's always a pleasure. That's always a good one. And then, the last year that didn't go too well because Green Bay stole it. Yeah, last year Green Bay stole that Thanksgiving Day game. Green Bay ate the turkey. Dang. But it's not going to happen this year. So they host Chicago for Thanksgiving. Then host Green Bay December 5th. Then they host Buffalo. Then they go to Chicago. Then they go to San Fran. And they finish out with the Vikings at home. So I have them 13-4. A 13-4 record, winning the NFC North and going deep in the playoffs. That's right, the Detroit Lions, deep in the playoffs. And they feel like they're one step away from the Super Bowl. And matter of fact, they should have been to the Super Bowl last year, but they were just too young. Just making silly mistakes. So this time, I believe Dan Campbell will keep everyone in check and not get overly emotional and take it up the next level. That's the high expectations for Detroit Lions. Hasn't been like this ever. So during my time of life, and maybe, during the Detroit Lions during the 60s, 60s and 50s. As a matter of fact, I remember Alex Karras with Detroit Lions. I used to follow Detroit Lions way back when I was a little kid, when I was in middle school, in junior high. They were phenomenal. Gary Danielson. There you go. I'm bringing up some Detroit Lions back in the day. Oh my gosh. Oh no, Mel Farr. Oh my gosh. Yeah. See, I can bring it. So, I've always been a fan of Detroit Lions. And then when you see them in person during the 80s, I was from 83 to 88. I just loved going to their games. It was the Lions always celebrate. No matter how bad they were losing back in the day, they had a loyal fan base. That's what I truly appreciated. And the fans were always giving it in the Pontiac Silverdome. But now that they're in Ford Field, downtown Detroit, feeling the groove, change the culture. Let's do this, Detroit. Let's do this, Lions. Let's bring a championship to Detroit. You heard it first. Beatles telling it like it is. That's what I gotta do. Let's do it, Detroit. It's time. See ya.